All right, UFC 308 Topuria versus Holloway Beckin Saturday afternoon on pay-per-view. Make a note, 3 p.m. Eastern, the start time on ESPN+. Of course, before we can get there, welcome in. It is our UFC 308 betting preview presented by DraftKings. Jon Anik alongside Funk Harbor's own, the former UFC bantamweight champion, now number 9 ranked featherweight contender, Aljamain Sterling, and our chief handicapper, Nick Kalikas, donning the all-black as usual, not trying to give anything away. So here we go, Aljo, with the UFC seemingly annual October jaunt to Abu Dhabi for a pay-per-view. You beat TJ Dillashaw in defense of your title. I think it was UFC 280 back in 2022. So I'd imagine fond memories for you around this time of year.
Yeah, it was a great time to be alive for the Funk Master. Get to defend my belt in Abu Dhabi with so many great people. The fight fans, the energy there is just, it's a different feel, different vibe. You have to be there to kind of experience it, what it's like. They get into all the fights, and there's nothing better that you can ask for as an athlete, a fighter, I should say, to just get the love and appreciation for the hard work that you put in. There's no better place to fight, if you ask me.
Yeah, special people and the hospitality is second to none. I was actually at a bar with TJ Dillashaw after that fight, and it seemed like I was the last dude he wanted to see after losing to Aljo that night. Nick Kalikas, always good to see you, man. And I'd imagine for you, it's sort of crazy to harken back to a time when Yas Island, Abu Dhabi sort of saved the fight game, 2020, 2021. You were doing a lot of capping on these fights in a COVID climate when there were no fans within earshot.
Yeah, you know what? Kind of kept the sports betting community going as well, outside of just the UFC and mixed martial arts, which I was very proud to say and be associated with us even having anything to bet on or whatnot, because it did really save the sports betting world. That's probably my biggest memory from that, that time zone, whatever, that time frame.
Well, we're happy to be going back, and I know for a lot of our crew who was there for a 5-week stretch from UFC 253 to 254, 5 successive weeks. They don't want to go for 5 weeks necessarily, but we're all excited to go back. Good to have everybody with us, of course, for this UFC 308 betting preview. This show brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code TKO when you sign up. The crown is yours. All right, so a lot of UFC featherweight championship history to speak of in Abu Dhabi. The closest fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway actually took place at UFC 251. It was at the now defunct Dew Forum behind closed doors. Eddie Hanarita, boys, this Saturday night as the newly minted featherweight champion Ilia Topuria makes the first defense of his title, and he will do so, Aljo, as a minus 238 betting favorite on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. He'll take on Max Holloway, decorated former champion, future Hall of Famer. Holloway comes back plus 195. Aljo, a lot of your contemporaries, fellow fighters, seem to see value on Max Holloway. What's your initial thought just on the matchup, mixed martial art for mixed martial art?
My initial thoughts, I think this is relatively a closer fight than people may actually think. At least the hardcore fans, I think they understand the problems that Max Holloway presents for a guy like Ilia Topuria, predominantly a boxer, really good combinations. But if you look at the first round between him and Volkanovski, even him coming off of the loss to Islam Makhachev, you see that the footwork gave him a lot of problems with him trying to establish the range. But once he got to him, he was able to put him out. And I think that's going to be the difference in this fight. Can he track down a guy like Max Holloway who has really good lateral footwork? And I feel like that's the wild card for me. I don't know what's the state of mind. Will ego get involved? Is Max going to try to trade with him early? Or is he going to just be smart, try to pick him apart and stay away from the grappling that we've never seen from Ilia outside of the Bryce Mitchell fight? But I think that's an ace in the sleeve that he got to use as well.
Fascinating. We'll get the Funkmaster focus and your exact keys to victory later on in the program. I don't think ego is going to lead any sort of dance for Max Holloway, but certainly Ilia Topuria is doing his best to try to occupy some sort of headspace. So Topuria arrives in this spot, Nick, first title defense, and he does so with much fanfare. Some would argue he's the best athlete in this division. Max Holloway certainly has a ton of momentum given what he did against Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. What do you make of the betting line, the fight itself, and the action that we've seen thus far?
I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, especially with the highlight reel that we just saw from Holloway and Gaethje. That's fresher than in people's minds. So I honestly thought the money would be pouring in on Max Holloway at this point, right. But it's not the case. I believe Topuria at this price, or maybe even a little bit higher, is correct. So I do think the betting line is accurate. accurate right now, and we're going to see some money probably come back in on Holloway as the fight get closer, because there's going to be some sharps too. There's going to be two-way action on this fight. Right now, it's the sharps kind of keeping Topuria up where it is. Right. But again, I would be shocked to see this line not drop. I mean, Holloway at plus money like we're seeing right now is just outstanding for most people.
Yeah, it's a big number. I try not to get too predictive as a play-by-play announcer, but seeing Max Holloway at plus 180 or so and then now elevating towards plus 200, I would imagine that is juicy to some bettors out there. But you're right, in terms of the betting public, Johnny Avello and his squad at DraftKings Sportsbook seeing 54% of both the bets and the volume in total handle on the standing champion Ilia Topuria. Aljo, as a man who stared death in the face cutting down to 135 pounds, I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. We're all thrilled to see you as a budding contender number 9 in the world at 45. It feels as though Max Holloway was sort of left for dead by some fans in terms of his featherweight future a few years ago. How concerned, if at all, are you in terms of the fight before the fight, his ability to make the weight and then to compete over 25 minutes at 145 pounds?
I mean, I don't know if I'm concerned in the sense of him making the weight. I think he's a true professional. He's going to make it. He's done it time and time again. I just think he never looks great on fight week. I think he makes his answers shorter and shorter with the staple of it is what it is, just to kind of get through those questions, just so he can focus on the weight cut. But I would imagine him going up to 55, beating a top contender who should have been fighting for the belt, and then knocking him out the way that he did to go back down to 145. I can imagine that's playing some mental games like I should just be here at 55 and finish out the rest of my career here versus going back down and not feeling as great. And I think he's going to make a conscious decision whether or not he wins the belt this weekend and decide the future of his career.
It's interesting because had Volkanovski beaten Topuria, Nick, at UFC 298, it stands to reason that Max Holloway would be fighting Islam Makhachev for the undisputed lightweight championship, right? So all these different belts could be coming Holloway's way. But, Nick, it's undeniable that he is the bigger man here. He did add muscle mass for the Justin Gaethje fight. Aljo is wise to point to the visuals that are never seemingly great for Holloway during fight week. But are you of a mindset that you would wait to see how Friday goes, or are you just sort of looking for line value on the underdog side, and if you find it, you're willing to pull the trigger?
Well, this is interesting because I do have a little bit of hesitation on Max dropping back down. I mean, at this point of his career, floating back and forth, if anybody can do it, I mean, he's the pro of all pros, so I believe in him. So I don't think it will be that bad, but it does kind of make me hesitate a little bit just because he didn't get knocked out by Gaethje. I mean, you're looking at a featherweight Topuria that has just amazing fight-ending power. We've seen it time and time again. So him dropping back down, does that weaken his chin a little bit? So for me, I would actually look the other way and to try to find value on Topuria. Like I said, I think the line is going to drop as we get closer to fight time, and people are going to be intrigued with that big plus money next to the Holloway name. So I think despite the weight cut, I don't think too many people are going to kind of buy into that either way, because like Aljo said, a lot of times historically, he hasn't looked the best during fight week. I don't think it's going to make a huge impact in the line. I think we're just going to kind of see the public actually come in regardless on Holloway.
Well, we know Aljo is going to be one of the more interested observers there, entrenched in the featherweight top 10. But it is interesting when you look back at UFC 298 and Volkanovski fighting Topuria. Essentially, Nick, this was a pick'em fight, and public opinion was split. Fighter opinion was split. Now we have Max Holloway as a plus 195 underdog, and you got to look far and wide to find the fellow fighters out there who are picking Ilia Topuria, but yet the sharp money is showing up at the window. So
100%. And you know what? You're talking about the more well-rounded fighter too. I know we have that fight-ending power that we'll talk about Topuria, but I think he could get the fight possibly under the ground, and he does have a ground advantage. So I think he is the more well-rounded fighter here of the two. And again, not taking anything away from Max Holloway. What we're seeing here is actually two GOATs potentially. Already Max Holloway has earned that spot, the GOAT spot, right? To talk about him as being one of the all-time greats ever in the history of the sport. I think Topuria could fall into that category, especially if he gets a big win here. He already has a nice win over Volkanovski. And if he can keep that train rolling after this possible win, man, I think we could be talking about a special, special card when it's all said and done.
All right, more from Aljamain coming up later in his Funkmaster Focus. Now, though, if we could segue to the co-main event, I would love to do that, because you got to be kidding me with this middleweight title eliminator. It was supposed to go down, as you guys know, in Saudi Arabia, and it shall be done, God willing, Saturday afternoon as the number 12 ranked contender, the still undefeated force of nature, Khamzat Chimaev, who is now swelled to a minus 245 betting favorite on DraftKings Sportsbook, takes on the former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker, who is the plus 200 underdog. Aljo, bro, take my money. Potential fight of the year candidate, scheduled for 5 rounds if need be. Talk to me about the potential, stylistically, of our middleweight co-main event.
I think this is a barn burner. I mean, Robert Whittaker does not get put away easily unless you're Dricus du Plessis. With that said, we know Khamzat comes out guns blazing in that first round. And if he can weather the storm like he did like Usman did in the first round, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if Whittaker could keep on building and take over the fight from Khamzat. But I think in the first round, the early goings, kind of like we just saw with Michel Pereira and Fluffy Hernandez, that first round is very, very dangerous, but can you get past that storm and then see how the fight plays out after that?
Nick, Robert Whittaker, still just 33 years of age, really maximized that showcase against the short notice replacement Ikram Aliskerov in Saudi Arabia, got a new contract, got a bump, and confidence is high. He's a self-believing individual, to be sure, but yet despite what he's done in the UFC, 17-5, all the momentum accrued since the du Plessis fight, here he is, and money keeps coming in, seemingly on Khamzat Chimaev. Your thoughts on the co-main event, Nick Kalikas?
Yeah, it's tough, man, because again, I agree completely what Aljo just said with the Whittaker side of things. If he can weather that early storm, he's got a legit shot of winning this fight. It's a 5-round fight, but can most people weather that storm? Not a lot of people can. So again, we've seen the Whittaker durability kind of sustain either. So that is a concern because I think a lot of people think that Chimaev can just run across here, take him down possibly and end it that way. I think he's got enough power on the feet that he might, test that chin of Whittaker as well and possibly put him out there, even though Whittaker does have the striking advantage overall. So for me, a lot of sharp money is coming in on Chimaev, and it seems like that's what's keeping the price up as high as it is right now. And I respect a lot of the opinions that are backing him, but man, it's hard for me to lay that chalk against Whittaker because if he can't survive, it gets interesting. And I think he does pull off a decision. If it does hit the scorecards, we will see a Whittaker 3-2 type decision if it gets that far.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Fascinating fight. I had a buddy text me, dude, Robert Whittaker plus 180. I got to pull the trigger. Well, if he had waited, plus 200 is out there as we tape our UFC 308 betting preview. Jon Anik alongside Aljamain Sterling and Nick Kalikas. 78% of the handle and 72% of the bets right now are on Khamzat Chimaev. In terms of his championship ceiling, Aljo, a lot of people felt as though he would realize his most success at 170 pounds. But now we have Khamzat Chimaev seemingly committed to this weight class, even if he competes infrequently. Do you believe, as you look at this middleweight division right now, commanded by Dricus du Plessis, that Khamzat Chimaev has what it takes to become an undisputed UFC middleweight champion based upon what you've seen thus far?
100%. But then again, I've seen Dricus multiple times dispatch opponent after I think that they have his number just on technical superiority. But he just finds a way to win. And I could see it going the same exact way with him and Khamzat. He seems like a very strong and durable guy. So that would be a very interesting matchup. One of the things I think, Nick, you said was this is going to be a 5-rounder or is it going to be a 3-rounder with him and Whittaker?
It's a 5
round. See, yes, I didn't know that. That's a game changer. And the longer the fight goes, I think it favors a guy like Robert Whittaker. But again, to go back to that, I do think Khamzat has all the ceiling in the world to become a world champion. Yeah. It's just whether or not he can get past that MO of being a 1-round or 2-round fighter. Because I think eventually someone's going to catch up to him. But if he could increase that threshold, which I think going up to 185 definitely will help his chances with that.
Well, he's going to the mountains in Russia, and he's getting new looks in training, and it's been a wrestling-heavy camp for him. And I have just said repeatedly, as someone who has had, for better or for worse, a front-row seat to a lot of these fights for 13 years, the electricity surrounding a Khamzat Chimaev fight is unlike really anything in mixed martial arts, at least for me. All right, I do want to segue, if I could, real quickly before we get back to the main event, to this featured bout in the featherweight division. Aljo, for you need the undefeated guy, Lerone Murphy, to lose here, okay? I'll just tell you right now, for Team Sterling, right, as you try to sort of work your way up there and given what you've accomplished, you might be one win away right now. But as we sit here, Lerone Murphy and Dan Ige, 2 guys ranked below you, and Lerone Murphy right now is the minus 250 betting favorite. Dan Ige plus 205. We all know what Dan Ige did in stepping up on a few hours' notice against Diego Lopez, but now he'll try to take Lerone Murphy's O. Any action for you on either side, Aljo, or any strong lean on either Lerone Murphy and Dan Ige in this feature bout on pay-per-view?
Well, I'm definitely leaning towards Team Ige. I train with him here over at Extreme Couture, so that's my guy. So I do have a lot of faith. I gave him some looks to help out with the Lerone Murphy style, trying to show him those feints and things like that, and some of the awkward punches that he throws from his southpaw and orthodox stance. So I think Ige's had some really good looks for this. He's been in great shape, and I think he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, especially taking that fight on short notice, becoming so close to winning, but maybe having a little bit more time to prep would be the difference between him beating a guy like Diego Lopez or not. And then now he has something to prove against a guy he was supposed to fight previously. The fight fell out, and now here they are about to fight again. And I think this is Danny Ige's time to shine.
Nicely done, Aljo. Nick, Lerone Murphy minus 250 coming off a main event win over Edson Barboza earlier this year, in which he really looked good and I think answered some questions, yet more questions to answer as Dan Ige tries to impose his will this weekend. Any action for you or any thoughts on this feature bout?
There is action for me. I actually gave out Murphy at minus 180 at UFC on the line.
Oh, nice.
Which was already recorded at the time. So now it's floated up to minus 250. And again, it's no disrespect toward Ige, because again, I do love what he did stepping in at short notice. How many people would do that? And he was this close to winning that fight, pulling it out. So he is a well-rounded fighter. He's got dynamite, no, pun intended, but he really does. His knockout power is underrated, and he's got great striking. So Ige is a problem from a lot of people. I just think this is Murphy's coming out party. I think it'll be competitive, but I just think Murphy's going to be a step ahead, and I think he wins on the scorecards. He's not going to get taken down, and I think he's just going to be a little bit slicker and will outpoint Ige on the feet. So Murphy will get that respect, but this is just an awesome fight, a good stepping stone for Murphy if he can get past it. For sure.
And yeah, that's well put. It's moving night in the featherweight division. And yes, the main event showcase against Edson Barboza was great. But you're right. In terms of a coming out party, you beat Dan Ige on one of the bigger pay-per-views of the year, and you are moving. All right, Nick, anything else on the card before we rifle it back to the main event? Either an underdog or something on the preliminary portion? Anything that you're wetting your beak with here at UFC 308?
There is. A lot of time, recency bias, hype, everything kind of comes into the equation, and you're able to find some spots. And I found one right now on the undercard a little bit with Shara Bullet. Magomedov is taking on Arman Petrosyan. Arman Petrosyan coming in as the underdog right now at DraftKings. You got to scoop up that value. I think this is a coin flip at worst. So any plus money on Petrosyan is the way to bet this fight, because again, you have two elite strikers that are going to go at it. Usually when people fight Petrosyan, they want to take him down and control him on the ground a little bit. Well, this is going to be a stand-up affair because both these guys like to stand and bang. So I think it's more of a coin flip type of fight.
All right, nicely handicapped. We'll see how it plays out. Shara Bullet Magomedov taking on Arman Petrosyan right now, slated to kick off the pay-per-view main card. All right, time now for the Funk Master Focus. And Aljo, I'll tell you, man, you need Ilia Topuria to win this fight to get Max Holloway out of that featherweight mix as you try to hunt down a title fight. I'm just saying. But what is under focus for you? Keys to victory on both sides for Ilia Topuria, the incumbent, and Max Holloway, the challenger.
I think keys to victory for a guy like Ilia Topuria is to use that stutter step that he does so well when he's light on that front foot, to close that gap, see which way he can head off Max Holloway and try to find any tendencies or patterns so he can land those combinations, whether he's going to the body, coming up top, or even landing that patented calf kick that he likes to throw from time to time. And if he needs to, when in doubt, use the wrestling, take him down, which we've seen. He's very high level on the ground, and I think that is the clearest gap in their skill set. And I think that's his biggest keys to victory. With that being said, I think for Max Holloway, staying on his bike, staying long, getting back to using his front kicks, some of his spinning attacks that he utilizes in the past, and don't let ego get in the way of testing his chin in the pocket too early. Play the longer game. I think that might favor him. And remember, he's the bigger guy, so try to use size to his advantage.
Who's the easier matchup for you? Oh, no, you don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that. But I do hope we see you in an enclosed 8-sided space with one of those two guys in the not too distant future.
Yes, I'm hopeful. I get past Mozart, take his O, give him that churro, like Max Holloway says, and I'll be next in line for one of these guys in the future.
All right, well, I got to go pack a suitcase, wheels up to Abu Dhabi. Thank you all for indulging us for the UFC 308 betting preview. Our producer is Cody Merrow, and we're right back with you next month in advance of UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic, live from Madison Square Garden, as we all say a collective prayer that fight stays together. With that, for Aljamain Sterling and Nick Kalikas, I'm Jon Anik saying so long for now. Thank you all for watching the UFC 308 betting preview. We will see you live Saturday afternoon on pay-per-view.